Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. Hope you're all well. Today we are looking at organizing your images with Capture One catalogs. Long title, but good subject. So today we're looking at everything from the import process to organizing and best practices and tips and advice on working with catalogs. If this is your first webinar and you don't know who you're listening to, my name's David. I'm part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. And as usual, we have 60-minute session today. And you're very welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout. If you're on your Mac or PC, if you look at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see the last section is called questions. Some of you have found that already. If you're on your Android or iOS device using the GoToWebinar app, there's a question mark icon at the top of the screen, and you'll be able to ask a question in a similar way. Please don't be offended if I don't get to your particular question. There is quite a lot of you, so I just try and answer as many as possible relevant to today's subject. Okay, so let us begin. So you should, in a second, be able to see Capture One, which is always a good start. And I will at times highlight the cursor like so, so you'll be able to see it a little bit easier on the screen. So what I'm going to do is we're going to make a new catalog, and we do a couple of different import scenarios. So one from a memory card, one from an existing location on disk, to see the difference between those. And then we discuss these kind of two areas, organizing by folders or with virtual collections. And then hopefully, if time allows, we get to things like importing sessions and exporting catalogs and backups and all that kind of other stuff as well. Okay, so we don't need this catalog, so I'm going to just close that one down, and we're going to make a brand new empty catalog within Capture One itself. So that is File, New Catalog. And we're going to give a name for our catalog. And at this point, of course, we're not concerned where we're putting images. What we're creating in this new catalog dialog is we're making a database. And the Capture One database does a couple of things. It tracks the location of your images, so knows where they are on your system. It contains a very nice high quality smart preview of each image. And it also contains all the adjustment data of your images. So Catherine Chang, that was probably an answer to your question, in that Capture One is non-destructive. We never altered the raw file data itself. All adjustments are held in the catalog itself. The actual raw image file or JPEG or TIFF file, whatever you've got in Capture One, is never edited. Okay, that's an important point. So I'm just going to call this Capture One webinar. It's going to be put on my pictures folder on my internal hard drive. The catalog database can go anywhere that you can access, but if you are thinking about performance and you want the best performance, then it makes sense to have it on your internal drive. SSD, so much the better. So let's say OK. And our catalog is open. And the only thing that we've made so far, if I right-click up the top, this shows me the path of that catalog, is that we've made this catalog here, Capture One webinar, which is a Capture One catalog. And those of you who are on Lightroom, potentially, this is a very similar sort of principle as the .lrcat. Okay, so we have a catalog. Now the first step is to get some images into the catalog itself. And I will say, for those of you asking about how do I move locations of pictures, how do I relocate, all that kind of stuff, then that's definitely what we're going to handle today. So don't worry about that. And an easy question to deal with now before we move on is, how do I delete a catalog? Then you just need to get rid of this, the database. It's gone. It's like a document, like a Word document or a PDF. You delete it and it's gone. Obviously, if you've stored images inside that catalog, which we'll get to, then you're going to lose images too. But if you're referencing images, which you'll understand in a moment, then you're simply just getting rid of the database. And you can have as many of these catalogs as you like. David Fukada, who was asking. No limit on the number of catalogs. It's just then a case of file, open whichever catalog that you want to have. Okay, so we've got our catalog. We need to get some images in it. So we are going to say file, import images, or Command I as a useful shortcut. And what's going to pop up is the import images dialog. I'm going to just reset this tool so you know how it's going to look if you open this for the first time. Now the import images dialog, I'll just make it as big as possible, is essentially divided up into these different sections on the left hand side. The two that you really need to pay attention to is import from and import to. So this simply means where am I getting my images from and where are they going to end up. So import from, import to. So import from, I would guess, or I would hope, is pretty self-explanatory. That is our image source. So that could be, you know, a memory card. It could be files that exist on your hard drive already, whether that's internal or external, and so on. So let's choose a folder, and I'm going to grab one. This is on an external hard drive. So I'm going to grab this folder here called Image Archive, which has 3 subfolders, 3 plucky phase 1 employees with various images in each. So I'm going to choose Image Archive, the top level of these 3 folders, and say Open. Now nothing happens right now. Why? Because I haven't ticked the first box here, which is Include Subfolders. So if I tick that, then straight away import my images like so. So that is the summary of all those images in those various different folders. If you're importing RAW and JPEG, I saw a question flash up in relation to that. So if you shoot RAW and JPEG on your camera, but let's say you only want to import the RAW files, then under View, you have some global filters, so you can always hide those JPEG files if you wish. So you're only going to get the RAW files. If you want to pair them up in terms of naming, then by default, if you're renaming, which we'll talk about when we do the next import, you can pair RAWs and JPEGs together. That's in the naming section here, which will keep the same name for each RAW and JPEG. Otherwise, you can just hide them in the global filters option up here. Okay, so we've got some images to import. We've made our selection. Where do we want to import them to? Now, these are already sitting nicely where I want them on an external hard drive. So my destination option here, I'm simply going to say current location. So they're going to stay where they are. Capture One will know how to access them. Capture One will create a high quality smart preview of each one. And also any adjustments in the future, of course, that we might do, and all the metadata will be stored in the catalog and so on. Now, the rest of the options that you have here, backup, naming, metadata adjustments, you are more than welcome to ignore all of this from there on. That's just bonus things you can do. So we can back up our RAW files. We can do some renaming, which we'll look at when we do the next import. We can add some basic metadata. We can add a Capture One style or preset if we want to apply adjustments to the image. And we could say auto adjust if we wanted to, or include existing adjustments if we've already worked with them in Capture One before. But I'm going to keep it nice and simple and just leave all of those options off. So the next thing to do is to say import all down in the bottom right hand corner over here, and in come our images like so. Nice and fast, pretty quick. And now you can see that we're generating previews. Before I answer a couple of questions, this part is really important. If we go to Preferences and the Image tab, you'll see the first option here, Preview Image Size 2560 pixels. Now that's fine for me because the monitor that we're working on today is 2560 pixels across. So what it simply means is that if I open an image in Capture One, let's just grab this one, for example, what we're looking at here is just the preview file that Capture One just generated. Capture One will only need to look at the raw file when I zoom into 100%, and then it needs to render to maximum sharpness and quality. Now, if I was working on a 5K iMac, I would want this preview to be up at 5120. Because otherwise the preview, even at fit screen, isn't big enough, and Capture One will have to recall the raw data. So every time you browse through an image, Capture One will have to be looking for the new raw data each time. So it's really important that you set that preview image size correctly for the system that you're working on. So 4K monitor, we'd have 3840, 2K, we'd have 2560, 5K iMac, we would have 5120. By default, these are smart previews, and there's no other options in Capture One for changing previews. So they are 2560 or whatever you choose here across, and they are smart. And we get on to smart a bit later as well. Just to answer a couple of questions. That's probably a good one. What is collection recent imports only? So we come to this catalog collection. So we have a category here called recent imports. So by default, you're only going to see the last 10 imports that you made, or you could add images to a selected album. And when we talk about albums, you can think, okay, in the future, I might want to import direct into an album. Let's just check. For those of you worrying about Aperture and Lightroom, we'll get to that, don't worry. Can I import TIFFs? Yes, you can. Can you import iPhone X HEIC files? Good question, John. I don't know. I haven't tried. I'd say suck it and see, and see what's what. John is asking, I said adjustments are stored in the catalog. Yes. If I open in another app, will the adjustments be included? No, because like any RAW converter, the adjustments are unique to that RAW converter. When we import from Lightroom and Aperture, we can do a bit of translation. But remember, when you're using any RAW converter like Capture One or Adobe Camera Raw, that processing engine is unique to that application. They do not translate between each other. And a good question from David before we move on. If I buy a bigger monitor, how do you handle preview updating? Well, first of all, you would change it in the preferences. So let's say we had a new 5K iMac, I would change it. And then I would select all my images, Command A to select all, for example. And then I would say regenerate previews, which I'm not going to do, but that's how you do it. So let's just go back that. So File, regenerate previews. Will do the business. Alrighty. So now that we did that import, what's happened post import? So if we look over in the folders area, we can see that if you remember, I imported from this hard drive, this one here. So we can see Traveler SSD, Capture One demo catalog, image archive, and then we've got our 3 folders here which match the exact path here. So we can see exactly the right path here in Capture One to those images that we imported. If you don't see the complete folder tree on your system, right click and you can say show folders hierarchy. So show folders hierarchy if you're not seeing the complete tree. Okay, let's do an import from a memory card so you can see the difference. Okay, so let's, I'm just going to put a memory card into my card reader if I can reach it without breaking it. 1 second. So memory card has gone in. Say note it's popped up automatically, which Capture One will do. So you don't have to go hunting for your memory card if you don't need to. So that will just pop up nicely. So I've got 20 images on this memory card. And for purposes of demonstration, I've picked these across a sort of variety of different years and so on, so that I can show you a little trick that you can do with tokens. So import from we've done because that popped up automatically. Import to, destination is current location. Now that doesn't make sense because they're on a memory card. We don't want to leave them on a memory card. We want to get them somewhere safe, i.e. on your system. So I'm going to say choose folder. And in this case, let's put them directly on my internal hard drive, not the external hard drive. So we've got images in 2 different locations, which is entirely possible, of course. I'm going to make a new folder. Let's call this image storage, for example. And this button here says set as import folder. So this is going to be my parent import folder, like so. Now, when we choose a location, an extra option pops up under here, which says subfolder. So if you want to, you can manually type in anything you want here, and Capture One will make you a subfolder. Or as an alternative, we can ask Capture One to automatically make folders based on some kind of metadata. So that could be camera model, it could be camera serial number, all kinds of stuff. So if we click on this button here, this opens our location token menu. This shows you all the criteria that you can choose to create a subfolder. But I'm going to do something pretty typical. I'm going to use the token, which is called image date. I'm going to drag it into the format field. Right now it's month, day, year, which kind of doesn't make a bunch of sense. So we're going to have year, month, day, like so. Yeah, year, month, day, and say OK. So now Capture One will look at each of those images, create a folder based on the date that they were captured. Something very common that people will do. As I said, there's loads of other tokens here. So if you're interested in camera serial numbers, for example, if you shoot 2 different bodies and you want to divide them up, you could divide them by focal length, by lens type, all kinds of stuff. Just have a look at that menu. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. So import from the memory card, import to image storage on my hard drive. We can tap this arrow to actually see where that is, just to verify. And the subfolder is going to be the image date, which is the date when the image was captured. If I want to rename, I could do the same thing here. And don't forget, this is where you compare your RAWs and JPEGs together if you're renaming. Okay, so let's say import all. This is 20 images. Going to be pretty quick, like so. By the way, preview generation is in the background. So if immediately I want to start working on this image, I can open it and Capture One. See, it's already done it. We'll prioritize making that preview straight away. So the import process is totally a background process. It doesn't stop you working on your image or anything like that. Good point to make. So now we can see that over in the folders area, we've got our destination like so. So you see Capture One made all these date folders automatically. If we look under here, again, it's exactly the same here. We have all our date folders. I'm just going to hide filters that were created by using that subfolder token. One thing I want to mention for the Aperture, what's the word? People in Aperture Exile, there we go. There's one other option here which you're only going to understand if you've used Aperture, which rather than current location or choosing a folder, you've got inside catalog. So if we choose inside catalog, that means images get stored directly inside the Capture One catalog file itself. So managed images in Aperture speak. So if you like that, if you've used to that in Aperture, you can do the same thing in Capture One. If you've come from Lightroom, then you're probably not interested in that at all. So Apple pushed you one way, Adobe pushed you another way, but free choice, you can do both if you like in Capture One. I mean, the benefit of storing images inside the catalog is that then you have this nice all-in-one catalog you can kind of move around anywhere you like and be able to freely open it. But of course, the size of that catalog cannot grow any bigger than the size of available space on your hard drive. Now, of course, with images referenced to other locations, we could store images across a number of external hard drives, or internal and external. So it's much more flexible. James says, if your camera has GPS, can you do subfolders by city or country automatically? No, you could do subfolders by GPS location, but it wouldn't know the actual country you were in. So that's something you'd have to do manually, I'm afraid. Can you import images from a card to 2 different destinations at the same time? For instance, internal hard drive and external. Yeah, that's what the backup is for. So backup to, you can say backup, and then you can select a different folder, and then that will back up whatever you're importing to that folder for backup, which is a good idea if it's mission critical stuff. I'm just reading Tracy's question. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I think you're going to learn that next, Tracy. So watch and learn, and then just hit me up if that doesn't answer what you've said. So now we're at this point, we can talk about probably what Stefan's asking as well, is like moving images around, moving folders, renaming stuff, all those kinds of things which people tend to mess up and then break their catalog, which is definitely what we don't want to do. And the golden rule for sort of doing anything with your images in a catalog is to do it within the catalog management program. So in this case, Capture One. So if I start off simple by just doing a simple image move, like if we want to move an image from, let's say, this folder to this folder, the fastest, easiest way to do it is to pick it up and drag and drop it like so. And then that physically moves it, as you can see, on the hard drive, and also updates the Capture One database simultaneously. So if I want to move that back, I can like so. We could shift select and do a whole bunch of images like so. Now they've moved to that location, and we can shift select and they're on the external hard drive. Let's say we want to move them to the internal hard drive to a different location, then that's also possible. So it's very simple to drag and drop from within Capture One. Now let's say we want to move them to a location which doesn't exist so far within Capture One. You might be tempted to go into your Finder, make folders, move the images around, and so on. Advice again is not to do that. So let's say we want to move these 4 images to a folder somewhere on my external hard drive. So all I need to do is click plus up here in folders, go to my external hard drive. Let's go to the image archive folder. I'm going to make a new folder. Let's call this outdoor portrait to be super original. And we say add. So that adds that folder to the Capture One catalog. Now this is not an import process. So using this method to just add another folder with images in it doesn't automatically import them. So just bear that in mind. If you want to get images into your catalog, do it properly and use the import dialog. There's a lazy way to do it, which I'll discuss in a minute, but it is definitely not the best way. So let's say add. Now outdoor portrait shows down here. So I can grab these 4 shots once more and drag and drop them over to, oops, excuse me, Wacom was just getting, come on, sticky Wacom. Now my Wacom is deciding to be a pest. Let's just shift select those again. There we go. And now we can move them to outdoor portrait. Nicely done like so. You can do the same with a folder. So if you suddenly decide this folder wants to live somewhere else, then you can simply drag it and move it to a different location, whether that's from external to internal and so on. If we want to rename images, then we also do so within Capture One by choosing them and saying batch rename. So don't do it outside of Capture One. I mean, you can save yourself a whole bunch of heartache if you just do everything within Capture One. It's faster, it's more efficient, and it's easier. So if I show you the wrong way to do it, let's just go back to that folder. Let's close you down. There's our outdoor portrait. Let's grab one of these, like so. Let's grab number 278 and change its location, like so. So now if we look at number 278, you can see it says it's offline at the top here. And there's a little tiny question mark, which you probably can't see in the thumbnail itself. So now what we have to do is say, sorry, Capture One, I'm a dummy. I did this in Finder, not Explorer. I need to tell you where I've put it. So we right click on the image and we say locate. And we say, okay, Capture One, I moved it to this location. Now I can say open. So this folder updates as now only having 3 images, and now this folder shows this image. Now that was a whole lot more steps than just simply picking up the image and dragging it to its new location. So it's way, way quicker to drag and drop in the proper way. That locate function we can also do with a folder. So if you move a folder outside of Capture One in Finder or a Windows Explorer, you can right click and you can say locate in exactly the same way. The third and final option is if you really go to town in kind of mucking about in Finder and or Explorer, is that if you remove or delete images or drag and drop images in here, and you've made a complete mess, is that you can right click and say synchronize. And when you say synchronize, Capture One will look for images that have disappeared and images that have appeared into that folder by you dragging and dropping, for example. But again, you can avoid doing all of that if you simply drag and drop your images, drag and drop your folders, and use the import dialog. And if you do it like that, then you're never going to really have to use any of that functionality. Let's see, Matthew says, can you relink multiple images at the same time? Well, if you've moved an entire folder, yes. If you've done sort of them in the same folder, you could use synchronize, of course, and then that will pick up multiple changes. But once again, my real strong advice is don't do it. There's no need to do it. If you do everything within Capture One, then you can avoid any synchronizing, locating, all that kind of stuff, like so. Okie dokie. Oh, well, the question which came up earlier was, let's say, two things. First of all, for the Aperture guys and girls who are asking, what if I want to make an image managed, copy it inside the catalog or move it inside the catalog, and then make it referenced? Again, drag and drop. I've got these 3 images here, for example. So if I drag them to in catalog, it will move them inside the catalog. Now, if I want to move them to a different location, I just drag and drop them to, I think I need a new nib in my Wacom pen. I just drag and drop them to wherever I then want them to be. So I can just drag and drop between in catalog and whatever destination I want to have. And also, if you're looking in catalog collections, so catalog collections, these are fixed. So this shows you all the images in the catalog, regardless of their location, and the last 10 imports that you made. So you can see the first one we did at 4:10 my time was 35 images, like so. And then we can see at 4:19 we imported these 20 images. But if you're not sure where this one went, like, oh my goodness, which folder is this in? Right click and say show in library. Boom, straight away it takes us to the folder where it is. And we can also do right click and say show in Finder or Explorer, and then it will again take you to the exact destination. So you don't have to remember where anything is. Last thing to do is to show you what the Smart Preview is. So I'm going to eject this hard drive. So let's do that. So you see now it says it's red, which means that hard drive isn't connected. I'm going to unplug it too. And but if we just go to one of these folders, let's just grab an image. It's a smart preview, so of course we can adjust it. So if we want to make changes, even though we don't have the raw file, we can do so. No problem with that whatsoever. Of course, we can't zoom into 100% because we don't have the raw data, so we're not going to get the full rendered image. We can't export because we don't have enough raw data to create our TIFF or JPEG. The only thing we can export is a JPEG quick proof, which gives us a duplicate of the preview file, which Capture One made earlier. But any adjustments that I've made, because they're stored in the Capture One catalog, when I reconnect this hard drive, which I will do now, let's connect it. Okay, it's connecting. Like so, those disappear. No synchronization needs to happen. It's instant. Now I can't move images around because we don't have the storage to be able to do that. But adjustment and exporting a JPEG quick preview is all perfectly fine. Let's see. Can I add a batch of keywords at import? No, but you can add keywords to a batch in the keywords tool. So you would just select whatever images you want and then add your keywords in the keywords tool, and it would be added to all images. Dan says, are the moves in Capture One reflected in the Finder or Explorer? Yes, and that's the whole point. Like if you do it within the catalog, then your Finder and Explorer just follow suit. It updates. If you do it in the Finder or Explorer, then you break your catalog and then you have to go and fix it. So you're creating more work for yourself by doing it in the Finder. Okie dokie. And Harwell says, are raw file changes stored in both the catalog and an XMP file beside the original raw file, like in Lightroom? Well, actually, Lightroom doesn't do that properly, just to let you know. The whole idea of XMP was to have interoperability between applications for metadata. So things like all this stuff, camera model, shutter speed, aperture, any IPTC data you might have. It was never designed to contain adjustment data. And you shouldn't rely on it in Lightroom because it doesn't actually contain all adjustment data. It contains some, but it doesn't contain things like local brushes, for example. If you want to turn on XMP syncing, you can down here, but it will only have sidecar XMPs for metadata, not adjustment data. So just be aware of that. Alrighty, anyone worried about importing Lightroom and Aperture catalogs? Don't worry, I'll cover that at the end. So you've seen how to do your organization in folders. Oh, by the way, if you want to get rid of a folder, you can right click and just say delete, and then it will be gone from the catalog, but it won't delete the images themselves. If you want to delete images, then if you go to File, then you have options here, Move to Trash, or delete from disk completely. Move to trash just means you have a get out of jail card, so it will go into this catalog trash so you can recover it if you need to, or you can say full delete from disk. So soft delete and hard delete. Okay, so you've seen how to organize in folders, but the limitation of organizing in folders is that raw files can only be in one location. So let's say we're looking at this image and you think, you know what, I'd like to print this out at some point. I can't, or I could make another folder here called images I want to print and move them into there, but then they're gone from their original location. You could then think, well, I'll just copy it, but then you're going to end up with two raw files. And then you don't know which one is the latest, you're using up hard drive space and so on. So you don't want to do that either. What you could explore is using user collections, which is all virtual stuff, which means that we don't physically move images around on the hard drive. We just create collections. Excuse me. We just create collections which contain our images, but they're never moved from their original location. So if I go to all images, let's make a few different kinds of collections. So we'll start with the most basic one. So if I click on the plus button, we get 4 options: album, smart album, project, and group. Album is just the most basic, a simple collection of images. So let's use that analogy. I'm going to call this stuff I want. Let's just call it stuff to print, then it's shorter. Stuff to print. I get an icon here and the name, stuff to print, and now all I can do is simply drag and drop images into that folder. I can shift select and drag a whole bunch of images if I want to, and if I click on the collection, then I just see my collection of images like so. So that's the most basic container. But those images aren't moved, and once again, if you think, oh, where is this image? We can right click and we can say show in library. Oh yeah, that was in my outdoor portrait session, for example. Or if I go here and say show in library, oh yeah, I shot that in 2014 with those nice guys in Cuba, for example. So that's the most basic of collections. Rather than dragging and dropping, what you can do is you can right click on any collection and say set this as a select collection. Can't even say that. Right click, set as select collection. An additional icon is added on the right hand side, which now means that if I go to any image and I say file, add all selected variants to album, then it's going to add them to that album, or better still, I can use the shortcut, which is Command J. So now I can click on an image. This currently says 7. If I hit Command J, then straight away it goes into my selects collection, as you can see. So once again, let's pick a jellyfish, Command J, and now that's in my selects collection. So that's the most simple of collections you can have. Just looking at your questions. How to import into an existing file structure. So if we took more shots of Jennifer, like so, well, that's and let's say we took more shots of this lady, how would we import into that? Easy. You would say import, and then you would simply choose the destination as outdoor portrait. So simple. Remember, where are we getting images from? Where do we want to put them? It can already exist in your catalog. That's fine. Whoops, cancel. Does making adjustments also reflect in user collections? Of course. So what did we have? We had, let's do something obvious. So I'm going to say right click, show in library. So our gentleman here, let's make him black and white, like so. And let's just whack in some contrast, for example. Now if we go to stuff to print, see, like so. It's the same image. It's a virtual collection. So really don't underestimate the usefulness of this area. So next, let's go back to all images. We can do a smart album. Now a smart album is self-populating in the fact that you set the criteria of what images should be in the smart album, and Capture One searches the catalog and places them in that album automatically for you. So let's do something dead simple, images that have a 5-star rating. And you can add your search criteria by clicking the plus here and then choosing from an enormous list of possibilities. Or if I delete that with minus, I can say, let's use a preset, and I'll pick the one that is 5 stars. Automatically, the criteria is filled in as the rating must equal 5 stars. So if I say OK, we get a smart album here, which is currently empty because nothing fits that criteria. But if I go and just find a couple of images that I like, so let's press 5 on my keyboard. You see that's made this 5 stars. And let's grab this one, and let's grab our Cuban man, and let's grab a nice landscape, for example. Now if I go to the smart album, you see it's populated with those images. So smart album, you set the criteria as well. Can a smart album be set for keywords, says John? Yes, absolutely. no problem at all. So if we said we don't have any keywords, but let's say I make a smart album, search criteria, the keywords equals or does not contain, contains, or is not equal to. So you can be quite loose. So if the keyword equals landscape, if there was, let's say, okay, let's just give this a name, keyword landscape, then the image would pop up in there. So actually, let's just put a keyword on this image, just so I don't prove myself a liar. Enter keyword landscape. Hopefully I spelt it right. Now if we go to this one, ta-da, there it is, sitting in our keyword landscape library. So smart albums can definitely be keywords. They can be combinations. You could say it's got to be 5 stars and have the keyword landscape, for example. So if we right click and edit this smart album, we could say the keyword equals landscape and the rating must equal, see it's gone, 5 stars. Ta-da, it's back. So if I change this rating to 4 stars, poof, it goes away. So really powerful and fast as well. So that's smart albums. Now, sometimes it's really difficult to make smart albums because you don't know how the manufacturer labels some kind of metadata, especially lenses. So for example, if we see what this image was shot with, if we go to metadata, this was with a Nikon AFS Nikkor 24 to 70 millimeter f/2.8 GED. So you're never going to figure out that the exact spelling of that and typing that into to create a smart album. So there's a better way we can do that with filters, which we'll look at once we finish user collections. So the next one is project, and this is where it gets interesting. So let's say we have a project and you're going to finally get round to building up your new website, which you've been meaning to do for years and years and years. And you're going to go through your image collection and find some images for your fantastic new website. So I'm going to make this project called My New Website, like so. So now we've got a project made like so. But what you'll find is that, let's just try and drag and drop an image. I can't drag and drop an image into a project. So the project is like the master container, and we must have something else inside that project. So if I right click or control click on the project itself and say new inside an album, like so. And I'm just going to call this possible images. So stuff that I think I might want to put on my brand new website, like so. So this album now sits inside. So I can look through my all images collection, or John, you could look through your 5-star keyword landscape collection, for example. But I just look through all images and think, okay, what do I want to have? I'm just going to drag and drop some of these images that I think might look good on my new images. I could grab, sorry, new website. I could grab a series like this. Let's have a few jellyfish. And finally, I'm going to need a picture for my bio. So let's say this is me. I'm going to drag that in there as well. And let's just have one more. So now within my project, I've got all my possible images like so. Now I could have further collections. So let's say new inside, and I'm going to make another album, and we call this profile pic, or let's call it about me. So images that I think would be good for about me, like so. So let's put old David in there, for example, or maybe I had a couple of different ones, like so, and so on. Notice that the project gives you a summary of all possible images inside here. So this is a good way to get an overview of a whole bunch of different collections, like so. Now, the interesting thing and the purpose about projects is the way they work with smart albums. So let's right click and say new inside smart album, and we're going to do the same thing, 5-star rating once more, and this will show you what the difference is. 5 stars, like so, and say okay. Now, if we look in this one, and I'm just gonna, for the sake of this demo, I'm just gonna make a few more pictures 5 stars so you can see how it works. Okay, so if we look in this one, 5-star rating, we've got 7 images. You can see it's written up there. So 7 images in my catalog which have a 5-star rating. Now, you're saying, well, you've got exactly the same smart collection here. What's the point of that? But if I go to this one, only has 3 images. Why? Because the project limits the scope of that smart album. So this smart album is only looking at images that fall inside this project. So that means this smart album is unique to that project, whereas this smart album is a global smart album. So this will search my entire catalog. So as your catalog grows, you might have a bunch of different projects, all with the same smart album 5-star rating, but they're going to be unique to each of those projects. We could do the same thing with color tags. Let's say new inside smart album. Let's call that green tag. Preset, choose green. Color tag is green. Say OK. And then now if I just press 7 on my keyboard, marks an image green, those are going to pop up here like so. But if I mark something green over here, say this one, like so, one that doesn't belong in that album. So let's say this one, if I mark this green, then it doesn't automatically appear in that smart album because it doesn't belong in that project. But if I was to then drag this image and put it in, say, About Me, for example, now it's going to show up like so. So projects are really, really powerful in that respect. Let's see. I'm sure you're coming to this. That's a hopeful, Ryan. But if I wanted to create a file structure and user collections for my portfolio images organized by year, do I start with a project or group? I would start with a project just in case you wanted to do any smart stuff in there. You could do a group, but a group is dumb, and you'll see what a group is in a minute. But you could use a group if you weren't going to use any sort of smart album stuff. Does user collections intensively change the catalog size significantly? No, not at all. I mean, this is just text data, like tiny kilobytes of data, so it does not make your catalog big at all. So now if we come to group, let's go back to all images and change this to, let's say, a new group. A group doesn't do anything clever. It's just like it's your tidy up item. So it's your housekeeping item, it's your organizational item. It has no smart properties. But to give you an example, I'm going to make a group called personal work, like so, and it just looks like a folder. And then I'm going to make, excuse me, another group called commercial work. Commercial work. If only I had commercial work. So now I can think, well, website, that's commercial. So I'm going to put that in there. My personal work, let's say I'm going to right click and put the project inside there and just call that family pics, family pics, like so. So now if you're an organizational freak like me, you can tidy this area up quite nicely, because you can imagine this could get quite long and it will then start disappearing off the bottom of your screen and you're going to have to scroll up and down. So if you can organize this nicely, then it's much easier to find all your various different images, files and folders. If we open up my webinar catalog, so this one here, just to see how I've organized it, I just close this down. So I've got a little group here called webinars. If I open that up, then you see I've got groups for different webinars, and within those groups I have albums of different images, like so. Capture 111 features, that's a project with a few things here, tutorial videos, and so on. So really the whole point of having groups is just to tidy it up a bit. And the example that I had here, personal work, commercial work, even under commercial work, I could right click and say new inside commercial. Let's have another group. And then I could say client folders, like so. And then I could right click on client folders, make another group. Let's say I'm doing a job for Mercedes. And within Mercedes, I could right click and say new inside project. I'm doing a shoot for the E330 or something like that. And away we go. So really, the sky's the limit with this organization, and it's much more powerful than organizing in folders. It doesn't mean organizing in folders is wrong. It just has more limitations than working with user collections. Can I create an album that just has black and white photos? Is there a black and white photo flag? No, there isn't, but you could use a color tag. You could color tag everything black and white pink, for example, and then you could make a smart album called black and white pictures with the criteria of pink images only, like so. Can I change a group to a project? No, so you can't, at least I don't think you can. No. So, but like if you decided you had this group and you want it to be a project, I would just make a new project, and then you can just drag, because all of this is drag and drop. If I want to move this album from here to here, then I can do so. So you could just make a new one and then just drag all the stuff out of the group into the project if you wanted to. Can you create a smart collection in a group? Yes, but it will be global. So for example, what I do is I have a group in my own catalog. Let's make a new one, and I call this global smart albums, like so. And then any smart album I just drop in there, like so. So my global smart albums, 5-star rating, keyword with a landscape, except we added that criteria. Let's get rid of that. So I have a group called global smart albums, like so. So yes, you can have smart albums in a group, but they're going to search the entire catalog. Can you move projects within a group? Yes, it's all drag and drop. So you can move all of this around if you wanted to. You can't rename the color tags, Einar, but what I was saying to, who was that, John? Or was it James, I think? We would say smart album, call it black and white images, for example. And let's say the color tag is, and then we can choose any of our color tags. Let's just pick that. And then, for example, if we choose the same color tag, purple in this case, then the image is going to pop up there. It's not black and white. If we're being pedantic, let's make it black and white. So the smart album can have whatever name it likes, as long as it uses the color tag that you nominated for that, for example. How are we doing for time? Rapidly running out of time, and I just wanted to cover the sort of Aperture Lightroom questions and so on and so forth. And a couple of common questions. There is no limit to the size of a catalog. Mine is 20,000 images, which is, I guess, small to medium. The performance is going to vary on your system. Capture One 11 has much better performing catalogs for larger catalogs. So, for example, my personal catalog, which is 20,000 images, would take 2 minutes to open in Capture One 10. It now opens in about 15 seconds. So a huge difference there for performance between 10 and 11. And what was the other common question? So no limitation, but you can have multiple catalogs if you want to as well. And I know people with catalogs of upwards of 40, 50,000 and so on, but it really is quite system dependent too. So it's hard to give you exact figures. And Catherine, just to be sure, yes, it's all non-destructive. I haven't magically somehow made this raw file black and white because it's it's a non-destructive editor. So the edits here are held in the catalog. We don't affect the image at all. So if I just make a new variant, see, I can have a black and white and a color, for example. So we're not duplicating anything. It's all non-destructive stuff. What's the size of my 20,000 image catalog? I don't know, actually. And it is reference frank. It's in the gigabytes. I can't actually show you because it's on a different user account, unfortunately, but it's on my internal hard drive, so it's not ridiculously big. Yes, our catalogs are bigger than Lightroom, but because we have less options about previews, but then we have smart previews by default. Okay, for those of you on Lightroom and Aperture, you can do a couple of things. You can say import catalog, so Lightroom catalog or Aperture library. I wouldn't make this the very, very first thing you do because it will take a long time, because Capture One will make new previews for every single image, so don't expect it to happen in 1 or 2 minutes. If you want to start by perhaps exporting smaller catalogs from Lightroom and Aperture, that might be a good way to go. But I personally had no issues importing my old Lightroom catalog. When you choose this option, you'll get a warning dialog which tells you what we can and can't import. For example, we can import all the metadata, crop, rotation, white balance. We can't import smart collections. And when you say continue, all you need to do is point to your lightroom.lrcat. We don't move any images, so you can still use your Lightroom catalog. We're just referencing to where those are. Same goes for importing a Lightroom catalog, Aperture catalog, my mistake. You get the same dialog pop up, and then we import pretty much the same things that we can do for Lightroom, but we can bring in your Aperture projects and so on and so forth. Finally, a few of you asked about sessions. If you've got no idea what a session is, that's a different way of file management, sometimes better, depending what you do. You can also import sessions into a catalog if you wish, but the session database does not synchronize with the catalog database. So if you make changes to the images in the catalog, they won't be updated in the session if you open them individually. If you want to know more about catalogs versus sessions, I'm just trying to open a little link. So I'll just paste a link into the chat window, which is a little shorter webinar which talks about catalog versus sessions, if you've got no idea what I'm talking about. Grant, oh, good tip from Grant. I took a 90,000 image library from Aperture into my first Capture One catalog, went smooth as butter, which was 75 gigabytes. So good to know. Rob says, don't confuse them. Exactly. That's why I don't want to go deeply into sessions. But if you want to know more about it, you can find lots of resources. Do we keep the keywords set in Aperture? Yes. Again, things like keywords, you can export them from Lightroom and Aperture, and then you can, in the keyword library, you can import a keyword text file. So if you've exported that from Lightroom Aperture, then you can do the same thing, but we will bring the keywords over anyway. What was the other thing? Backup. That was it. So the simplest way to back up on a Mac is simply to use Time Machine, because then all your images are backed up and the catalog database is backed up. It's very easy to roll back to earlier databases if you need to. If for some reason you're not using Time Machine, you can say File, Backup Catalog here, and Capture One will back up the database, but no images. So you need a different strategy for backing up images. And if you want to restore to an older database, you can just say Restore Catalog and choose an older database to roll back to. But if you're on a Mac, the complete no-brainer really is Time Machine. It's kind of foolproof, really. Backblaze, as Rob is saying, I know that's very popular in the US. So you can dump everything on Backblaze, so you've always got a backup. something as simple as Dropbox you could back up to as well. There's tons of different options. And the conclusion of that is there is no excuse not to have a backup, really. And you should never, ever lose images or lose adjustments if you have, or at least not very many adjustments, if you have a good backup routine in place. I have the same catalog I was using since Capture One 7 in 2012, and I haven't lost a single thing just because of having a relatively simple and sensible backup strategy. Catherine, no, not Catherine, Tracy, you must have missed that bit. So when you import an Aperture catalog into Capture One, we don't change the location. You'll see the exact path of where the images are. They won't get moved into the Capture One catalog, but if you want to move them away from Aperture's internal managed library, then you can just drag and drop them to anywhere you like in the folder tree. But then you're going to break your Aperture catalog. Just be aware of that. So I think that was pretty much everything I wanted to cover. I know I haven't answered all your questions. It's just not possible within an hour. So apologies if we didn't get to your specific question as such. Oh, that was the very last thing I want to do. If you want to export as mini catalogs, like splitting up a catalog or sending a catalog to someone, any collection pretty much you can right click on and say export as catalog. And then you can choose to include the originals if you wish. So you end up with a managed catalog. So for example, if I say, which one, let's just grab this website one, and we right click and I say export as catalog, include reference to originals, just call this export cat, say export as catalog. Capture One will make us a new catalog here, export cat. Let's open that up, which contains those images inside the catalog and also gives you a copy of how the user collections was. So that's a totally separate catalog, which has managed images, a duplicate of those images inside. So then it's nice and easy to send that catalog away to people and so on. Alrighty, okay, everybody. I think that about wraps it up in the time that we have allowed. And once again, sorry if I didn't get to your specific question. If you're around, not next week because I'm away, but the week after next is all about using your Wacom tablet, which is actually super simple, but there's a couple of nice things that we can talk about for making life easier, I think, in Capture One when using Wacom. The recording of this webinar will be up tomorrow. Now, most of you watching these webinars at this time, I've been saying for the past God knows how many weeks, you'll get a follow-up email tomorrow with information on how to get the recording. Due to a human error, mine, none of you probably ever got that email because I didn't change one tiny link in the management system, but luckily from now on you will. So tomorrow you will get a follow-up email with links to the recording and future webinars and so on. So my apologies for that, and that will come through about lunchtime tomorrow sometime. Okay, many thanks for your time again, and I hope it was useful today and you're all going to be a lot more confident with your Capture One catalogs and enjoy newfound freedom of organizing your images. So take care, everyone, and see you all soon.